Hello, my name is Beata. Welcome to another one of my videos. In this one, I will tell you about the symbolism and meaning of the Knight of Swords in the Thoth deck. As usual, I will start with a description of the card, and then we will dive deeper into the symbolism of all of the elements that we can see here. I will list the meanings of this card in divination at the very end of the video, and the timestamp for when I start talking about that is shown below now, so you can jump there if you want. When we look at our knight, we see a lot of haste in this card. His horse looks like it's leaping down from the sky. There is no saddle, there are no reins. The knight is holding weapons in both hands, so we would think that it would be difficult for him not to fall off. But when we look closely, we see that his body is in perfect harmony with the body of his horse. They seem to be moving in perfect unison. Their speed is helping them to stay balanced. We can see three birds flying next to them, and we can see that the clouds are parting in the bottom part of the card where our knight is headed. He is wearing full armor, like the Knight of Wands, but his armor is green, like the armor of the Knight of Cups. And there is another interesting element of this card. Our knight's helmet is topped with long wings that look a bit like the wings of an insect. And there is also a six-armed star in the middle where the wings meet. Let's now listen to a quote from the Book of Thoth to see what Crowley tells us about this card. He is a warrior helmed, and for his crest he bears a revolving wing. Mounted upon a maddened steed, he drives down the heavens, the spirit of the tempest. In one hand is a sword, in the other a poniard. He represents the idea of attack. So we will start by talking about the crest and weapons of our knight, and before we do this, I just wanted to let you know that you can support this channel by liking, commenting and subscribing. You can also become a patron of the channel for just €3 per month, so that's a little over $3. I also accept one-time donations through PayPal. All links are in the video description below. Thank you very much for considering this. Your support secures the future of this channel. Okay, let's get back to the Knight of Swords now. Crowley calls him the spirit of the tempest, and this relates to Ariel, the spirit in service of the magician Prospero in Shakespeare's play The Tempest. Ariel is sent by Prospero to shipwreck King of Naples and his crew near Prospero's island. And this gives us a hint that our knight is like a force of nature. He can be very powerful and very destructive. The wing we see on his helmet is his crest, and if we have a closer look, we will notice that there is a writing on the wings. So we have 4 directions here. The wing is like a compass. And we can see that the direction that the knight is coming from is northwest. And in traditional astrology, north is associated with the element of fire, and west is associated with the element of air. And this is a reflection of his elemental attribution. As a knight, he is firstly connected with the element of fire, and because he is in the suit of swords, his secondary element is air. He is therefore the fire of air, which Crowley explains in the following way. He is the wind, the storm. He represents the violent power of motion applied to an apparently manageable element. So we see that there is an inherent imbalance in his character. He can't be controlled by anyone, and he can't even control himself. And if we look at where the knight is heading, we see it southeast, and this direction is associated with earth and water. He is therefore chasing something material that would also awaken his feelings. In the middle of his helmet, he also has a 6-pointed star, and the 6th card of Major Arcana is the Lover's card, and this card is associated with the zodiacal sign of Gemini, ruled by Mercury. It shows inspiration and intuition. It's also sometimes related to difficult choices in life, moral dilemmas, and balancing the opposites in ourselves. Here, it shows us our knight's North Star, the inspiration that he follows without even considering other options. And we will see how dilemmas and choices also come into play in his character when we start discussing the decans he rules over. Horses in this deck show the instinct of the knight and their subconscious impulses. And here, Crowley tells us that the horse is maddened. We can imagine that it's leaping to run off somewhere, and even though the knight has no way of controlling the horse, it looks like they are both madly following the same target without consideration for anything happening around them. Our knight has weapons in both hands, so he is focused exclusively on attacking his target. One of the weapons is a rapier, and the other one is a poniard. And we have seen rapiers in the 6, 8, and 9 of swords before, but this is the first time we have a poniard in this suit. A poniard is a long thrusting knife, and the version that we see in this card is actually one used in fencing. And this leads us to believe that our knight is not involved in a real battle, it's more of an exercise. The stakes are not life and death, but win or lose. His green armor suggests that there is a Venusian influence here. As we know, green is the color of Venus. And we will see where this influence comes from in this card when we get to discussing the decans that our knight rules over. But here we just need to notice that this influence gives him creativity and inspiration. And let's hear what more Crowley can tell us about his character. The moral qualities of a person thus indicated are activity and skill, subtlety and cleverness. He is fierce, delicate, and courageous, but altogether the prey of his idea, which comes to him as an inspiration without reflection. If ill-dignified, the vigor in all these qualities being absent, he is incapable of decision or purpose. Any action that he takes is easily brushed aside by opposition. Inadequate violence spells futility. Chimera bombinans in vacuo. So we see how he is very capable, yet because he can't reflect on his instincts, he is doomed to follow them without thinking. And if he doesn't have a clear goal to focus on, if his inspiration doesn't come to him, he will become indecisive and purposeless. His actions are clever and swift, but they don't have much force behind them. He can be very easily opposed by others. And it all shows us a lot of initial momentum, but also a lack of follow-through, a lack of strong conviction in what he is doing. He's just gliding on the winds of inspiration without the means to control where he's going. Chimera bombinans in vacuo comes from a longer quote, Utrum chimera bombinans in vacuo, posit comedere secundas intentiones. This quote comes from William Chillingworth and was intended to mock those who engaged in philosophical debates about fine details of religious beliefs. This quote comes together with another one that I think everyone has heard of, whether a million of angels may not sit upon a needle's point. And you could consider this question, you could debate it, and you can even arrive at some answer in the end, but how useful would that actually be? The first quote in Latin is translated as, whether a chimera buzzing in a vacuum is able to eat second intentions, which is just a more abstract parody of asking a question that might only be interesting in an intellectual way, but also one that in practice leads you absolutely nowhere. So Crowley, using this phrase, chimera buzzing in a vacuum, wants to convey just these futile pursuits of the intellect, being busy thinking and trying to make sense of things, but arriving at absolutely nothing that can be used in any practical way. And before we discuss the decans associated with our knight, let's look at one last element of the card. Next to our knight, in the bottom left corner of the card, we can see 3 swallows flying in the same direction as him. Swallow is a bird associated with Jupiter, who rules one of the decans of our knight. Swallows are known for their swiftness and agility. They hunt insects in flight and even feed their young in the same way, as you can see in this photo. And we have 3 of them here, which points us to the third Sephira Bina, associated with Saturn. Saturn is one of the decan rulers here, same as Jupiter. I think we are ready now to have a look at the decans. The Knight of Swords rules the last decan of Taurus and 2 first decans of Gemini. The time frame associated with this card is from 11th of May until the 10th of June. The last decan of Taurus is ruled by Saturn, and this is the 7 of Discs. This card shows us that something we put effort into has been abandoned. We hoped for some outcome, but nothing happened. All hopes and dreams come to nothing here. Taurus is ruled by Venus, and this is where we get the creativity and inspiration from, but the influence of Venus is severely limited here by the rulership of Saturn. This decan shows the lack of follow-through that I mentioned before. There was an inspiration, an immediate action, but after that the efforts were abandoned, the interest was lost or moved to some other new pursuit, and therefore all of the effort put into the endeavor is wasted. The first decan of Gemini is ruled by Jupiter, and this is where we get the swallows from. And this is the 8 of Swords. Our knight can't make his mind up, he has too many thoughts, and there are too many opinions around him, and this creates a situation where he is completely unable to decide what to do next. He is wasting his energy on unimportant things. The second decan of Gemini is ruled by Mars, and this is the 9 of Swords. And this is the most difficult part of his character. This is his tendency to be petty. It's his tendency to be ruled by primitive instincts. And this is how he can be hurting people around him, but also himself. This card shows us he likes to domineer and can be really crafty and cruel. So we see that this set of decans is quite challenging. It's the most difficult set out of all of the knights, because in other suits at least, the 9s give some positive influence. Here, the 9 of Swords adds the most challenging energy into the mix. Now I'm gonna tell you a bit about how to interpret this card in divination. If this card describes an action, it will be a sudden, impulsive action, something we didn't fully think through. The Knight of Swords often shows air travel as well. If this card describes a person, this is someone intelligent, but also crafty and sometimes cruel. This person is ruled by their instincts. They don't have the ability to reflect on how their actions impact others. And even though they can get inspired really quickly and they have a good intuition, they also lack the follow-through. They can't focus on one thing for a longer period of time. They may be just jumping from one thing to another without ever finishing anything. This person, unfortunately, can be petty, can be putting too much focus on unimportant things. They can have a tendency to be vengeful and domineering. As a partner, the Knight of Swords is going to be quite difficult, and this can be someone who is unstable, who is always chasing something new. It is difficult for him to accomplish things in life, and he is very critical of himself, which unfortunately also means that he will be critical towards his partners and other people around him. If the Knight of Swords shows up in your reading as advice, it will tell you to follow your instincts, act quickly, and don't stop to think, follow your inspiration. As an obstacle, on the other hand, it will show us that we are acting too quickly. It will invite us to think about why we want to do something. And when we see this card as an obstacle, we should really just stop and consider different options. It can warn us of diving headfirst into a situation that might turn out to be different than we initially thought it would be. In terms of jobs that the Knight of Swords would be good at, we can mention a politician, especially this type of politician who is always picking apart the opposing side's arguments and is being quite petty, never actually achieving anything practical for his voters. And this could also be a stand-up comedian, a journalist, maybe a writer as well. And this is where the cleverness and the intelligence can be put to a good use. A lot of comedians have made careers out of being petty and even a bit cruel, taking it to an extreme and therefore making it really funny. Among famous people and movie characters who fulfill this archetype, we have to mention Jerry Seinfeld and Larry David, and the character of George Costanza that they created for their sitcom Seinfeld. Jerry Seinfeld made his whole career in comedy on pettiness and overvaluing small details. His jokes are often about the tiny little annoyances that nobody else really focuses on, but in his jokes they really take center stage and become super important. The character of George Costanza is a perfect example of someone who is very self-critical, but also quite petty and critical of everyone around him. Larry David and his character in Curb Your Enthusiasm is also another example of the Knight of Swords. He is slightly more shaded with cruelty and malice, but there is also a simple honesty about his character. He's not even trying to pretend that he is nice. There is a freeing shamelessness in him that disarms any criticism. And these examples show us that the energy of Knight of Swords can be channeled in a positive way as well. It doesn't always have to be destructive. If the intelligence and cleverness are put to a good use, especially in a context where there are naturally always new things to focus on, this scattered energy can find a positive way to manifest itself in the world. That's it for today. Thank you so much for watching, and please remember to like the video, leave a comment, and of course subscribe to my channel. I would like to thank everyone who is already supporting the channel. I appreciate your help very much. And if you want to help secure the future of this channel, please consider a one-time PayPal donation, or you can become my patron for just €3 per month. And once we have 100 Patreons, all of them will be able to suggest and vote for future content of the channel. So if you want to have your say in what videos I create next, click on the link in the video description below. Every little bit of support and every donation is great help and is greatly appreciated. Once again, thank you all for today, and I will see you in the next video about the Queen of Swords very soon. Thank you. Bye!